It's come round to Q&A time again. Hello, I'm Rosie Hardy. This is Rosie Hardy Gardening. Let's start. There are lots and lots of questions again. Thank you so much. Hello Rosie, I have a question on growing sweet peas. For the last 5 years I've struggled, but I don't want to give up. What is causing the problems? So you're getting just a few flowers, then they die off, you're getting yellowing on the leaf, and you're telling me that you are watering them regularly, etc., putting them into good soil. Well, it sounds like you're doing all of the correct stuff, but you may be watering them too much and they don't like to be drowned. So what I think you need to remember to do is to put them in the ground. Yes, you've put in good material there for them to then eat, but make sure that you are not watering so much that they don't get a chance to dry out on an occasion and then re-wet them. Plus, it is always a good idea to give them quite a bit of liquid feed at the same time. So something like a seaweed food is really good for them. And remember, as soon as they start flowering, keep cutting the flowers off. They need to have the flower cut off so that they will keep on putting on more flower as well. I hope you have more success. This one is, why don't gardening books agree on the requirements of plants? I look at plants for shade and some say it'll be fine in full shade. Others says it'll be partial shade. How do I know what is correct? You can ask gardeners the same question about a plant and they will all give you a completely different answer. You cannot give one limited answer to it because it's not just shade, it's all about the moisture content, it's all about the soil they are in. It's a whole rounded idea, and then it can be different in different countries as well. So what you have to look at is you have to look at the fact that one will say one will say the other. And quite often you will find that you can put a plant in exactly where it says on the label, and yet you can put another one of exactly the same in completely opposite conditions and it still works. So that is, the plants have not read the book. So it is, take everything that is there, all the information that is there, and go with your garden and how it works. It isn't an exact science, I'm afraid. Not exactly one plant going to go in the same place. My sister-in-law, bless her, used to buy 3 plants. One for the correct conditions, one completely the opposite way that way, so maybe into shade, one the other way into full sun. See how far a plant will grow. And plants are really tough. They will grow in all sorts of conditions. So glean as much information from the books as you can and then divide it up and go, right. But it isn't just about the shade. It's also about the soil. It's also about the moisture. Hello Rosie, after watching your videos, I'm keen to try propagating from tip cuttings. I'm growing quite a few perennials from seed: Aquilegia, Salvia nemorosa, Verbena bonariensis, Echinacea purpurea, Eupatorium cannabinum, Lupinus and Sanguisorba. Will any of these be mature enough this year to take tip cuttings from, and will I need to wait until next year? I'm in the northwest of the UK. Okay, so to start off with, of the varieties that you have listed there, only 2 would you be able to take tip cuttings from. The rest of them would be basal cuttings or seed only, or divisions. So you can take tip cuttings from Salvia nemorosa, you can take tip cuttings from Verbena bonariensis. Now if you've set them growing and they are going on quite nicely, growing on, and once they've got to a young plantlet somewhere around about 15 to 20 centimetres in height, you can do what is known as pinching out, but you do that to make a tip cutting and then you take your cuttings from there. But your other plant material that you've said, they won't do from tip cuttings. You've got to take them by splitting them or basal cuttings. So if you're interested in propagation, then please do take a look at our propagation workshop that you can go on. It's a wonderful course. It will help you, and it'll help you understand better how to propagate. Hi Rosie, I'm cheating a little bit this year for my hanging baskets. Ordered lots of tiny plugs from a nursery, saved money. because I need a lot, because I have a lot of hanging baskets. They're going to go in at week 14. I reckon they're going to be really small. So she's talking about tiny little plugs, only this, really about a centimetre across. That is small. So wondering what to do and, what do I need to do with them. So you're looking at Bacopa, Bracoa, Safina and Diasia. Right, so when you get these, they're going to be soft. You need to let them acclimatise to whatever you've got in the way of a growing area. That's the first thing. Then I would suggest that you pot them up into slightly bigger plug cells or pots, and then once they've started to really start growing, then start to put them into your baskets. That will be the best way to do it. But remember, they're in small plugs when you get them. They will not have any food. So the other thing you will need to be doing is you need to be giving them some nice liquid food. Don't give them anything too high in nitrogen. So something like a maxi crop or a seaweed based fertilizer as a liquid feed will do. Have fun. That sounds like you've got a lot on your plate to do all of those baskets, but I'm sure they will look fantastic. Hi Rosie, thank you. I would be grateful if you could please give me some advice on how to take care of Caryopteris plants in the UK in terms of when and how far down to prune them, where to keep them throughout the winter, etc. Now, Caryopteris are perfectly hardy in the UK, so you can keep them in containers or you can have them in the ground. When they have finished flowering in the autumn, you give them a quick tidy up prune, and that's all you do. You're just getting rid of the old dead flower head and then you leave them there. When we get to about this time of the year, so we're now in early spring, you will start to see them putting on lovely little shoots all the way up the stems, and this is when you want to be thinking about pruning them back. But beware, because we still have a few late frosts. So I would say wait until the end of March and then look at your shrubby growth. You've probably got something that is sitting at around about 45 centimetres by this, and you want to be taking that down at least half, if not a little bit more. And you want to be pruning to outward facing buds so that you get a lovely framework, which will then grow on and do really well. Have fun with them, they're a really good plant. I have a northeast facing flower bed in the morning and light shade in the afternoon. It can get quite windy. Clay soil, I've added a lot of well rotted manure. Some plants get very floppy, especially scabious, which ends up almost horizontal by the time it's finished. Geraniums go big and beautiful but flop outwards so the middle looks bare. I'm wondering what is wrong. Is there not enough sun, or what is happening here? Right. You've said you're using a lot of rotted manure and compost on these beds. You're already in an area which probably stays quite moist, and because you've got only morning and afternoon sun, they are all going to try and get to whatever available light you have. So I think you're mulching too much is one thing. Just reduce the amount of mulching that you're doing. Get the border to being slightly drier, that way the plants won't overgrow so much. I also think scabious are not as happy in that sort of situation. They'd like a little bit more sunshine, so maybe have those more on the west side rather than the east if you can. But I also think what you're allowing your plants to do is you're allowing them to grow really big and then get floppy. All of these things can be given summer pruning. So when they've had their first flush of flower, give them a cut back. So take them back down, then allow them to regrow, reflower. That way you will get much better, much sturdier plants. And I think that's where you need to go. And also if you're going to try a few more part shade plants in there as well, and they won't end up so leggy. But everything, if it's starting to get leggy, give it a haircut. That will really help keep it going. Some really interesting questions this time. Hello Rosie, how do I get rid of scrubby tree growing in the middle of another shrub? Are there tree killing screws or something with a dose of herbicide that would help? This is a really tricky one, and to start off with, I would not use herbicide if you want to keep the other shrub growing, because you'll have contamination with what you've got. So what I'm assuming is that this other shrubby growth has gone, or this tree growth has gone inside as a seedling and now is growing around the one that you want to keep going. The best way of getting rid of it is to cut it out as near as you can to the other shrub and start dissecting the pieces that are going down, and just get it down as far as you possibly can. As soon as you see any more coming up, just keep on cutting it back. The more you do that, the more you should be able to get it out. It's very, very difficult. I mean, you could paint with a little bit of herbicide onto the cut, but as I say, that herbicide might then contaminate and go through to the one that you want to keep. So it's really up to you as to how you do that, but I would say chip away, and just reduce the strength of vigor of that other shrub that is growing within the one that you want to keep. Can you please suggest a scented shrub for outdoor seating area with a long flowering season through the summer, if possible into the autumn, for part shade, sun, a reasonable soil, not wanting it to be too wide and not too tight? So my first thought here was a rose, because there are some beautiful shrubby roses which rebloom and have perfect perfume, and you can get some really lovely ones. So that would be my first thought. Secondly, I thought about a small buddleia, because they're going through and they're lovely. So there are some really beautiful new varieties out there which don't get too tall. So you're only wanting something sort of my height, so just around about 1.50 m. So there are some lovely buddleias, and you would be able to cut them back, etc. So that would be one. Now this one, replanting a completely new border in the UK. Would you give some examples of a range of plants, perennials, to give spring, summer and autumn interest to create a cohesive shape to the border? Thank you very much. This is a complete video in its own, so I'm sorry I can't give you everything right the way through, but what I can do is give you suggestions of what to do, what to look out for, and how to proceed. So the best thing to start off with is start being nosy. Have a look at people who've got gardens nearby. Go to open gardens nearby. Go around, have a look and revisit monthly to see what is growing, so that you know what you can grow in your garden, and ask the questions. What is that plant? Where would you get that plant? All these things. People who have got their gardens open are happy to share their knowledge and help you, and it's much better to do that than anything else. Now, what you need to remember is, when you've got a new border, you need to start with shape and form. Colour is the last thing you're thinking about. So you need to have some good shrubs, both deciduous, flowering and evergreen. That's a starter. And then once you've got those, then you mix in the perennials, and you need perennials with big leaves, you need perennials with strappy leaves, and then you go for the colour after that. I hope that helps you. It gives you a structure to head for, and then you can start going into specifics. Hello, I would like to extend the flowering season of a large ornamental cherry with 2 clematis, one winter flowering, the other summer, early autumn. But is this a good idea, or will the clematis suffer because of the lack of moisture due to the cherry tree? I'm in Kent, clay soils. I'm actually more worried about the cherry tree than I am about the clematis, because once you get clematis growing and going up and smothering the top and climbing through your cherry tree, they then cover the canopy of the tree, and the tree then starts to suffer. So you need to be very, very cautious on what you actually get. Now, if you are going to get the clematis, always make sure that they are planted on the shady side of the tree. That will mean they're in a slightly moister area. It also gives them cooler growing conditions for their roots. So that is one tip I would say. And then when you're looking for these plants, go for the least vigorous types, because then they won't create too much canopy and start the tree to actually have a problem. I hope that helps you. I have a small garden behind a fence. There are some factory units I want to screen. Can you suggest evergreen shrubs and trees that would reach to 8 or 10 feet high very quickly with a little bit of year-round cover? Currently growing a ceanothus. I live in Norfolk, zone 8B, sandy, chalky soil. Fence is east facing. Thank you. Okay, so I've thought of a couple of very easy to grow plants that will go up quite quickly. One would be choicea. It's not everybody's first choice, but it does do the job. It's evergreen, it flowers, and it will go quite big. So that would be the first one. The second one would be a viburnum of some sort, and there are plenty to choose from. And again, they grow pretty well. They'll tolerate shady positions, etc. Then the last one I would think about is Itia ilicifolia. Now these are wonderful. They are evergreen. They have the most amazing tassels that go through in the spring, so it's of interest right the way through, and it's just something slightly different. I'm wanting to remove about a quarter of my grass lawn for flower beds. What is the best method to do this? I tried doing it by hand last year, and holy moly, what a workout. And nowhere to dispose of the old sod. No place for compost pile. Currently looking into no dig method using a black tarp. Now, all I can say to start off with is do not use a plastic or a black tarp for the no dig method. You need to have something which is going to decompost itself and go down perfectly well. I personally would, if you're going to do it, lift and turn the sods upside down. You then have a soil bit, the grass will stop growing, and you can then cover and create a compost border that you can then dig into and put your planting on. That was one way of doing it. Now, the other way that you could do it is if you don't mind using a herbicide, you can kill off the turf. And this was done very successfully by somebody that I supplied plants to about 20 years ago, where they just literally sprayed off the border that they wanted, dug out holes for where they were going, a little bit bigger, where they were going to put their new plants in, and then used those old sods and put them at the back of the border so that they rotted down there. So that is another way of doing it. But if you don't want to use herbicides and you haven't got enough cardboard, etc. for the no dig, I would just literally take the turf, put it upside down, and then you're basically, it is rotting down at the same time with compost over the top. Off you go, start again. Hi Rosie, I got some air layering spheres to try out. Any advice on rooting shrubs and vines this way? Especially want to try them with actinidia and sorbaria I have in the garden. I would say the sorbaria, it goes mad anyway, so you should be fine. The actinidia will be great because it likes to layer. So when you have these spheres, make sure that you've got a really nice moisture retentive medium inside there. A lot of people use moss, that sort of thing, so something that's quite airy, not too heavy. And then the one trick is do not put the spheres anywhere where there is direct sunlight, because if they get in there, they heat up and you can absolutely burn anything that's in there. So make sure your spheres are in a shady position when you are putting them in there. Have fun. It's great to use something like that. Hi Rosie, is there any truth to planting during the full moon? Now, this is a very old technique, and in fact you can get something called the Farmer's Almanac, and that is all about when you sow certain crops and whether you sow them with the new moon, when it's the middle phase of the moon, or when it is the full moon. And it can work because at the end of the day the moon is creating tidal waves all over the world. That is how our tides work. There is an ebb and flow, and it does work. And I have to say that I will always sow my carrot seeds when there is the new moon phase, and it works really, really well. So I am actually a convert to it. I think there is, a good reason for it, and our ancestors used to like to do it, so why not? Okie dokie. Right, this one comes from someone who is moving home in a month, and it's a rented property, planning to pot up many of the plants in the garden to take to our new home. These include herbaceous perennials, some very small shrubs, planted a number of summer flowering alliums. Can we dig these up, pot them to move them on, and then plant them in our new garden successfully? Many thanks. Now, this is a tricky one. You're in a rented property, so although you actually physically bought the plant material, you've put it into somebody else's property, and by rights they actually now own those plants. So you need to make sure, this is in the UK, so you need to make sure you have permission to take those plants out and with you. Now, it's a very grey area, but just be aware that that can be a problem. So that's my first thing. So you've put in alliums and other things, they'll all lift perfectly well. The alliums, you do need to go down and dig quite deep. They put on a lot of white roots going down all over the place, and if you nip them a little bit, they might just have a little bit of a miss, not flower this year, but certainly you can lift them and take them. Hopefully they're not too tall with their growth. That will be absolutely fine. So once you lift them, put them into containers, put them into big boxes, whatever you are doing, just make sure they keep well watered, not overwatered, but you keep them, and then when you put them into the new garden, don't expect them to do you a really good flowering that first year. They'll have a miss year, but at least they're feeding themselves with all the foliage that's there, and you'll have good ones for the following season. This one is also about allium. Someone has got wild garlic, wild onion overtaking the flower beds and the lawn. We're grateful of any advice. Now, this can be a real nuisance. You can dig out as much as possible, and that is certainly a good way to start, is by digging out as much as you possibly can. Digging down, using a sieve over the top of a wheelbarrow and just making sure that you get all the tiny little bulbils out. So you need quite a fine sieve, because there are tiny little bulbils with these, and that's what you've got to try and get out, is all of those. The other thing you can do is just keep on cutting the foliage off. So I know you say it's got into the lawn, but keep that bit where the lawn is probably lower, and just keep on taking away its option of being able to actually produce foliage and produce food back down into the bulbs. That's one thing. If you don't mind using a herbicide, then you can spray it, but be very, very careful with a herbicide, because one, you don't want to kill your grass off, two, you don't want to kill off the plants in your garden. So if you can, put a cover around and just spray the actual bit. If you don't mind using herbicide, do that, but I would go for the other options first. Digging up and actually making sure that you sieve out and try and get all the little bulblets. And then the other thing to do, as I say, keep on cutting the leaf off, keep on cutting it down. Don't allow it to grow, don't allow it to feed itself. Once you starve it, that will reduce its vigour, and you then should hopefully stop it coming through. But it is a pest, I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.